Hello again, and welcome to If I May. In today's episode, I really want to dive into these personality type theories that I uh, have discussed or brought up in the past. I have results from two of them that I've taken. Looks like one was recently, and then both were recently. In the past couple of years, I've gotten the same results for the last few times taking them, with a little different. I'm sure the specificity of it was a little different, but I just wanted to dive into it and kind of discuss it, and maybe pull on some curiosity from the audience, and maybe get more people involved in understanding and kind of relating and sharing and getting into understanding themselves in this manner. I find that it's a really good point of relation. It's easy to talk about, from in a deep context as well as a more shallow context. So I think it'll be really something fun to dive into, and like I said, hopefully it piques your interest. You can relate. I'm sure you'll relate in more than one way, and and I can definitely give you references on different places or sites to look into it and to getting the testing. Most of the time, the test is free. For the results, you kind of have to pay for the full results and the full breakdown, but you can do research on just the results, for free, and find the same similar information and understanding. It's usually not much if you do pay for it. I used Intuity, no, Truity. For some reason, I get Intuit, the site Intuit, and Truity mixed up. I've done that a couple times recently, but yeah, it's Truity. Also, I've been a fan of Jordan Peterson, the clinical psychologist from Canada, and he also has a test on his site which I've taken. I may try to find those results and go over them today if I don't take up too much time with these first two. But his is similar to. They're all similar in some ways. There's the three most popular ones that I know of that are usually the most used in today's psychological world are Myers-Briggs, the Enneagram, and then the Big Five. Myers-Briggs was kind of the first one that I got into out of the three. It started with 16 personalities. 16 personalities is based on Myers-Briggs. They make some small adjustments, and there's some debate on how legit it is, especially for intro dives into personality theory and understanding yourself. And so I found a lot of context just correlates better with Truity. That Truity is a more relatable source. Sorry, I said that in a very weird manner. But yeah, Truity is a more relatable source. 16 personalities is a less reliable just because of some of the things that they do to kind of tweak the assessment. But yeah, so let me just start by getting into my results for the Myers-Briggs. Myers-Briggs was founded by let me see. So the Myers-Briggs or Myers-Briggs Type Indicator or MTBI was initially constructed by Isabel Briggs Myers and Catherine Cook Briggs, and popularized by psychologist Carl Jung. It's one of the most popular tests. In psychological typing. According to this theory, there are 16 variances, 16 different personality types with which one can fall under. And I fall under the Myers-Briggs. And I fall under the INFJ, personality type. So to explain the INFJ to you, I stands for introversion. Introversion is the energy style that I kind of dictates the way that I function and how I manage my energy. In is for intuition. The intuition is my cognitive style. Also describes how I process information. F is for feeling. Feeling is based on my value style and the orientation of my personal values. J is for judging, and that has to do with how I organize and see life. The contrast to each of these, the contrast to I would be E, which would be extroversion. The contrast to intuition would be S, which is sensing. The contrast to feeling, or F, would be thinking. And the contrast to judging would be P, or perceiving. So I am an INFJ. As an INFJ, it was, not that long ago, the rarest personality type. I think for males, it's still in the top 2. And even across the board, for both in general, it's in the top 3, I believe. And so, yes, it is one of the most rarest personality types. When I first found out I was an INFJ, it was considered the rarest personality type. But since then, that statistic has changed. So based on the results of this test, like I said, I'm introverted. Introverts enjoy contemplating on ideas and experiences, being in calm surroundings, exploring a subject in depth, reflecting on thoughts or feelings, maintaining distance and privacy, quiet and solitude. Whereas extroverts tend to enjoy interacting with people, being in busy surroundings, engaging with the outside world, expressing thoughts and feelings, being noticed by others, stimulation and activity. My responses in this assessment were 63% consistent with a preference for introversion and 37% consistent with a preference for extroversion. Now over time, this number will change. A lot of it's circumstantial. And depending on where I am at in life, I know there were times where I was much more extroverted than I am now, or at least when I took the test, and as well as, more introverted than when I took the test. I know INFJ as well as ENFP and a couple other types tend to be, I think INFJ is the most common and most typical characteristic is they tend to be more of ambiverts as opposed to true introverts or true extroverts. Similarly, ENFPs, so extroverted, intuitive, feeling perceivers, tend to also be pretty ambiverted. They tend to be the most introverted of extroverts, while INFJ tend to be the most extroverted of introverts. So in this assessment, there are, according to this assessment, 6 facets of energy style. Those facets are placid versus energetic. I am 59% placid versus 41% energetic. In placid mode, you shy away from being busy just for the sake of being busy and prefer to take a mellow approach to life. You find you have less energy than other people around you, and you like to conserve it for what matters most to you. The trait is usually associated with introversion and to a lesser extent perceiving. As far as energetic, with which I'm 41%, when you're feeling more energetic, you have a high energy level and like to keep busy. You may leap out of bed in the morning, ready to take on the day. You have a lot of things you want to get done and often find that people can't keep up. The trait is usually associated with extroversion and to a lesser degree, judging. The next facet is reserved versus expressive. I am 53% reserved versus 47% expressive. Reserved mode, you tend to keep your thoughts, feelings, and observations to yourself. Other people may have difficulty reading you, and even people close to you may not know how you really feel about things. Expressive, you readily share your thoughts, feelings, and ideas. You freely communicate exactly what's going on in your head without editing yourself or worrying about whether you'll be understood. The next facet would be private versus prominent. I'm 68% private. As a private person, I'm selective about how I socialize, preferring small groups or no group at all. I tend to shy away from large parties and big social events, which may also leave me feeling drained. You like to pick and choose when and how you interact with others. And I say that's all very true. But the irony of it is, like I said, I really like going out and clubbing in my last podcast. I really enjoy that kind of thing. So there are certain circumstances that kind of contradict how I am. But 68% private, whereas 32% prominent. So prominent people love being around others and in the center of attention, or in the center of the action, sorry. They like to feel like they're an important part of the group and that their friends, family, and acquaintances seek their company. They tend to make an effort to entertain others and enjoy their attention. The next is calm versus joyful. 76% calm versus 24% joyful. As a calm person, you tend to make a big deal out of As a calm person, you don't tend to make a big deal out of the good things that happen to you. While others may cry tears of joy or jump up and down with excitement, you respond more quietly. Happiness to you is a pleasant sense of contentment. Whereas 24% joyful people feel high points in life fully and completely. They are capable of tremendous enthusiasm and make the most of opportunities to feel joy. In this specific facet, I've realized something really that stood out in my childhood. And that's how when I was younger, around the holidays, Christmas Day and stuff like that would come. And I remember a couple instances, one very specific. Actually, I was a little older, and my parents took the family to Disney World. And how I didn't act very, excited or enthusiastic when I was there most of the time, or maybe all the time. I was pretty mellow or straight-faced, and for me, I was just enjoying myself. But, my mom saw it as I was being ungrateful and unappreciative because of how unexpressive I was being. And there were other instances of this growing up, and I realized how it was okay, there was nothing wrong with how I was being, that's just how I am. That's my personality. I don't tend to express great joy in an outward manner. I tend to enjoy it. I tend to enjoy joy and happiness calmly within myself. I don't often throw out my emotions to other people. And, learning about INFJ and that I am an INFJ helped me understand this. And also, kind of made me wish that when I was younger, that people, my parents, namely, but not just my parents, that other people would take the time to actually to get to know me and to really understand me for me. As I said before, parents often try to create their child into something that they see as ideal, putting aside or forgetting that that person is their own person, will be their own person. No matter if that person came from them or from someone else, they're still going to have individualistic traits that make them their own, that make them different, that make them not so easily understood by the limited understanding we each have. And in taking the time to really understand how that child is or how they work, how that individual is and how that individual works and thinks, you can build a much better relationship, bond, and help that person grow and develop astronomically better than just trying to control who they are. But moving on to the final facet, aloofness versus friendliness. Aloof, you prefer to let others come to you. Ironic, that's what I said in my last podcast, in the last episode. You're reluctant to approach people and try to strike up conversations. You let other people take the lead in developing. Friendly, when you're more friendly, you look forward to meeting new people. You're enthusiastic about others. You easily find things in common with new people. I know similarly to the calm and joy expression of emotion, with aloofness, I know that within both my adopted and biological family, that aloofness has been a rubbing point. It's stressful being around my family, especially my adopted family, and therefore I tend to be much more aloof with them. They've been much less accepting of me as an individual, and much less inviting of learning about me as an individual. And therefore, I tend to just maintain my distance. I question it all the time because I would like for us to have a better relationship. And I feel I've tried at times to create that, but that it's rarely, if ever, taken seriously in the times that I do put myself out there. And, I've had siblings also tell me how displeased they are with my aloofness. And I, have expressed that I don't mean anything by it. And, if they ever want to talk or need anything, that I'm here and available and more than willing to. And that it's nothing against them. But that's just how I am. And, like I said, for my family, I guess it's just harder for them to just accept me. And maybe they accept me, but they just don't want a part of it. I don't really know. But it is what it is. And, life goes on, and like I said, I've found another family. And to me, family is the people who take you in. It's not the people you're blood related to or the people who necessarily adopt you, or raised you. They are family, but no more and no less family to me than the people who day in and day out presently accept me and help me and live with me and are actively a part of my life. But if I may move on. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed one. There's one other section, part of the introversion, extroversion, and that's solitary versus engaged. Solitary person, you are highly sensitive to insights, sounds, and other stimulants from the world around you, sorry. And you often find busy environments overwhelming. Most of the time, you prefer quiet solitude, where others may seek to be in the middle of the action. You'd rather find a tranquil corner where you can reflect. Whereas engaged, I'm 17% engaged versus 83 solitary. Engaged people like being in the middle of the action, are drawn to busy, noisy, and otherwise stimulating environments. They like boisterous places such as crowds, events, loud concerts, and big parties. So that also is, another leaning and sign of how reserved and to myself I can be, And in stressful environments, it just increases exponentially. When I'm stressed, I am much more solitary. I'm much more aloof. I'm much more reserved. And I can be very sensitive to outer stimulants, whether it be certain noises, being touched unnecessarily, like all that kind of thing. And similarly, that kind of thing also is why I question at one point, or have questioned, maybe I have, autism of some sort. But, regardless, it is, if I do or don't, I'm just human at the end of the day. And I'm just trying to learn and better myself. Use the tools that I have access to and to the best of my ability. Sorry, moving on. Now to sensing versus intuition. Sensors tend to focus on observing sights, sounds, sensations, noticing details, experiencing present moments, concrete, probable facts, realism and practicality, knowledge from past experiences. While intuitives observe patterns and connections, interpret meaning, imagine potential, ideas and concepts, innovation and creativity, possibilities for the future. My responses were 7% consistent with sensing, while 93% consistent with intuition. So I'm very strongly intuitive, often a characteristic noted by women. So definitely one of the things that makes a male INFJ stand out to other people in a more basic sense. So the facets of the cognitive style of sensing versus intuition. Realistic versus imagining. 14% realistic versus 86% imagining. As an imaginative person, you have an abstract way of thinking and tend to focus on ideas, concepts, and theories rather than create things. Your imagination is a fertile place and you have no trouble envisioning things you've never seen in real life. The trait is usually associated with intuition. In contrast, realistic people have a concrete way of thinking and tend to focus on things you can see and touch rather than abstract ideas, concepts, and theories. They don't tend to spend much time in the world of imagination, preferring to focus on real life. And this too is also where I kind of see the contrast with ADHD. ADHD people tend to think very abstractly. And where I said kind of in a spider web, whereas typical thinkers think more on a linear path, or in this sense, more realistically. The next facet is concrete versus conceptual, whereas I am 4% concrete versus 96% conceptual. As a conceptual person, you're interested in discovering the larger principles behind what you see, and enjoy learning about scientific, mathematical, and philosophical theories that can give you more insight into the events you observe in your daily life. These traits are usually associated with intuition as well. On the other half of that, concrete people learn by doing. To really understand something, they want to experience it with their own hands. They tend to not believe in things that they can't see for themselves. Sometimes I think that the 96 versus 4 is a little off, because there are some instances where I'm very much more concrete, and I guess it's more circumstantial, like I've said before with other things. But yes, I'm definitely more conceptual on average, much more. Facet is traditional versus progressive. 6% traditional versus 94% progressive. As a progressive person, you love new ideas and you feel that innovation and futuristic thinking is the key to making the world a better place. 100% accurate for me. You're attracted to politicians with radical ideas and love to imagine how things could be and done better. That's halfway true. I love to imagine how things could be done better, more efficiently, more proficiently. Politicians, I don't trust or buy into. Politics in general, I feel that, especially the way that it is, the binary system we have, is inaccurate, is wrong. There's way more than two ways to look at things, and simplifying it, I understand the purpose behind simplifying it, but there's a danger in oversimplifying things, just as there's a danger in overcomplicating them. And I think the way that it is set up right now is way too simplified, and that is more so used to just control people in a gauged manner than to bring realistic thought and progressive thinking to society. Which I guess falls in line also with my progressive versus traditional way of thinking. The next is factual versus insightful. This one is really weird, and I don't know how accurate it is for me, percentile-wise, because I'm 100% I'm 100% insightful versus 0% factual, and that maybe it is true. Maybe I just haven't realized it. But yeah, as an insightful person, you enjoy exploring cause and effect, and always ask why. Very true. People would always get mad at me for asking why. In school, in college, in daily life, in my spiritual walk as a previous Christian. And one of the main reasons I left Christianity and religion as a whole was because of the conflict in asking why. You're not content to accept things as they are. The other half, factual people, tend to accept things as they are and do not spend much time asking why to them. And there are times where maybe that's not, based on that definition, I guess that's actually very true. I can't really think of an instance where I struggle to not ask why, like where I just want to accept something. Unless I'm just overwhelmed, but then, it's purely situational. So like, I don't really want to just let it go, but I feel kind of backed against the wall and don't have much choice. And I realized, like, in a lot of respects, when I went to school, when I was homeschooled in middle school, and I was always questioning things. And, my questions would often bring about, or for some reason, start arguments. That's how people always took it, including my mom, my teacher. When I was I went to Bible college and I was in church, and I was very active and always asking and seeking knowledge and understanding. And one big reason which I'll talk about soon too, that I kind of stepped away from church and religion in general, is because of people's deep apprehension to ask why. Like, raised in church, like, it's like, you don't question God. I'm like, why not? Why don't you question God? Like, and then, I learn a little more and read about Abraham, the father of the Israelites, was originally Isaac, renamed Abraham, was in the desert, wandering around the desert, and had a dream where he literally wrestled with God. So if he can literally get into a physical altercation with God, why can't I ask God why? Like, that's way lesser of an offense in those kind of terms. And so I've seen this kind of show through a lot in my life. And most presently with work, why doesn't this, like, why can't we better this? Or, why don't we try this? Or, and they hate it. And like, that's one reason I hate working for people. And I hate I hate to say hate so much, but I detest, despise, dislike the environment of the business business politics and corporate politics is for that very reason. It's so hypocritical. It's so help us better our company, but don't ask questions and don't bring us any solutions unless we ask you to. But then make sure they're in line with only what we're talking about and what we want. And I've heard of situations where it's not like that, but I've yet to find one myself, and I've been looking so hard. But moving on, if I may, and let me apologize in advance for the background noise. My phone just went off, so that's what that was. But yeah, so finishing up with the factual versus intuitive, insightful. Finishing up with that, it does also say, instead of preferring to search for deeper meaning, factual people tend to instead of preferring to search for deeper answers and a sense of the big picture, I'm twisted. Hold on, sorry. Okay, so it said, you're not content to accept things as they are, instead preferring to search for deep answers and a sense of the big picture. This trait is usually associated with intuition, and that is the insightful trait. And then finishing off the factual side of it, where it said, factual people tend to accept things as they are and don't tend to spend much time asking why. To them, it's more important to understand the facts of situations than to speculate about its causes. So factual people tend to be much more like go with the flow, like don't shake the norm. If it's broke, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And insightful people tend to be the ones who kind of press the issue, the rebellious type. That's how I take it. The next facet is practical versus aesthetic. And similar to the previous, I'm 0% practical and 100% aesthetic. The description says, as an aesthetic person, you have a love of the arts and appreciate a wide variety of cultural experiences. You enjoy anything that elevates your sense and reminds you of the beauty of the world. This trait is usually associated with intuition and to a lesser extent with feeling. The other half, practical people, appreciate things for the practical value and the ability to get the job done. They appreciate useful tools, handy gadgets, and they don't see a point in things that don't have a practical purpose. I think that is kind of, I don't know about this one, because I get a lot of like this similar sensation that something aesthetically pleasing gives. If I find something that's just really practical, that just works, that I haven't seen before, I get that same feeling. So this facet section, I don't know if they broke it down well, but I kind of get what they're going at. More so with, I think a better way of putting it would be the aesthetic types are more of adventurous. Well, that's in the next section. I don't know. The aesthetic types are more of the testers, while the practical types are more of the doers and the stabilizers of maybe like of a system. As far as me being 100% and 0 based on these descriptions, I don't know about that one. I am very much aesthetic for sure, much more than practical. But they're like in my work and stuff, I like to be practical. I don't want to do more than necessary for no reason, and I'm always looking for ways to be more proficient, to be like proficiency. And I feel proficiency is like the the best way to be practical. Like it's the upper echelon of practicality. But moving on again, if I may, habitual versus adventurous. 24% habitual versus 76% adventurous. As an adventurous person, you love new experiences. Very similar to the previous, yeah. These probably could have just been stuck together. Love new experiences. The more exotic, the better. That's accurate. I do really love experiences, and that's one of my biggest fears with my condition and my thinking of the future and in general. Like, it's been throughout my life, and the older I get, the more intense this fear becomes, I realize. But it's a fear that I will be unable or incapable of experiencing new things. Like, that's what I want my life to be about, is experience. And as a 4, it's fitting for a 4 as well, because 4s have this known tendency for they want to experience their feelings, all the feelings that they can. So it's very fitting for me as an INFJ and a Enneagram Type 4. But anyway, you are often willing to try things just for the sake of novelty. Accurate. Because even the most unlikely activities seem interesting once or twice. That's very true. On the other hand, you may get bored with experiences as they become routine. Also very true, and also a very easy segue into a connection with ADHD. As people with ADHD tend to get bored with routine. They struggle with it. Very ironic. But, also it makes sense. That's one thing that I learned in learning about, one thing that I've seen in learning about myself is all these connections. And that's how I've come to justify and realize, yes, I really am an INFJ. Yes, I really am an Enneagram Type 4. Yes, I really do have ADHD, because it just they match up. It's like you have tracing paper and you draw one item on it, and you draw another item on it. It's all similar. You have some tracing paper and you draw a horse. And then another person draws a horse, and another person draws a horse, and you hold it up you stack them and hold them up to the light, and in it you just see you see a horse. It's a little distorted, but it's obviously a horse, And it's kind of like that. That's kind of how it feels, and that's kind of what gives me the reassurance to know that I'm being genuine and authentic and accurate and honest with myself in my pursuit of self-improvement and betterment. But yeah, it's very encouraging to see this and read this and find this. So yeah, I would always suggest looking out for that for yourself, because I know it's tough. It's really hard to accurately place yourself. It's one of the toughest things in the world, per psychology. But this trait is usually associated with... You may find yourself abandoning hobbies and interests that begin to feel too familiar. And my hobbies are kind of like roller coasters, or hills and valleys. They fluctuate. I have a lot of them, and they fluctuate. So it's like when someone asks me, what do you like to do, or this and that. I like to do a lot of things. Just depends on the time, the day. Where my interests are at that point in time. So it's really hard for me to answer questions like that, and really awkward. But anyways, the other half of that, habitual people, pretty obvious, but habitual people are creatures of habit. They enjoy familiarity, comfortable experiences. They do not need to they do not tend to venture too far out of their comfort zone, preferring instead to stick with what they know and what they like, and see no reason in wasting time with anything else. And I've had a lot of friends like this, and I've also seen in some Reddit, INFJ, Myers-Briggs theories, or typology threads on Reddit, people that fit the habitual, like probably counter to what mine is, where mine's 76-24, theirs is like for sure like 24-76. And it's very, like, I can understand it. And there's definitely times where I feel more habitual in nature than adventurous. But in general, I'm definitely more adventurous. That's very accurate. And I'm glad that I am, because sometimes I feel, well, for me, maybe that's why too. Because I am adventurous, I'm glad that I'm adventurous, and I see how being overly habitual will make you stuck, and I don't want to be, like, I guess I have a fear of being stuck, but then, it's probably because I'm adventurous. So, but moving on to the last letter, the F. I'm wrong. Sorry, the last letter is J, but INFJ. The fourth letter, the third letter. Sorry, this podcast got broken up into 2 days because my recorder broke. So I'm trying to hold the continuity, but I'm doing this over 2 different days. Thinking versus feeling. This dimension describes your orientation to personal values. Your preference for thinking over feeling can be thought of as your preference for head versus heart in your decision making. This dimension relates to how you prioritize conflicting values, and whether you tend to feel more comfortable relying on logic or reason, or emotions and personal judgments. Thinkers value logic, competence, and objectivity. They believe that every person has a responsibility to take care of him or herself. Feelers value empathy, cooperation, compassion. They believe everyone has a responsibility to take care of those around them. Now, one of the things for INFJ that I've seen, even in myself, and also seen in my research, is INFJ commonly mistype because they juggle, and they have a competency for both thinking and feeling, very strongly. No, it always depends person to person. Everyone is a little different, so it's never 100%. But for myself personally, I know that if I'm stressed or feeling overwhelmingly emotional, then I tend to sway towards thinking. If I'm in a toxic environment, I sway strongly towards thinking. However, if I'm content with where I am, if I'm, feel a steady sense of happiness and purpose, then I definitely swing towards being more of a feeler. And so that can be very, very confusing. It's one of the bigger challenges for an INFJ, is finding that balance between thinking and feeling, because they are like polar opposites of each other. So having that kind of yin and yang within yourself, finding the yin and yang basically, between the two is tough, and it's a lifelong battle, I believe. And I mean, I'm definitely better at it than I used to be, but it's also like it's a double-edged sword. It's like you can do both, but at the same time you have to do both. Like your mind does both. So there are times where it's useful, and then there are times where it's an obstacle. And that's just one thing that I've realized, and I'm sure a lot of other INFJ relate to. Sometimes I wish I was much less feeling, and sometimes I wish I was much less thinking. Sometimes the coldness of the apathy I know comes from that thinking. The apathy that I occasionally will feel will come from that thinking within myself. But to go further into it, thinkers are concerned with logic, using logic, reasoning, being unbiased and impartial, considering costs and benefits, seeking consistency and justice, keeping a competitive edge, and making objective decisions. Feelers are concerned with acting out ideals, engaging emotions, considering the impact on people, seeking harmony and appreciation, serving others, and making authentic decisions. And it's funny, and I know I struggle so much with making decisions because I do fall so much in between these two. Like, all of these are me at some point in time. In the right circumstances, I seek logical reasoning, being unbiased and impartial. But then other times, I want to act out my ideals and engage in my emotions. And it's very much situational. And it's very troublesome in finding direction in life when I feel a little lost or displeased, which is ironically common. Also, another token of a Enneagram Type 4 is their chronic FOMO, almost chronic fear of missing out. And to add to the percentiles for those two things: thinking 42, feeling 58. So yeah, very close, very neck and neck with one another. Now that you understand your preference for feeling, I'm trying to speed it up. This is going to be a little long, but you guys seem to, I got really good feedback on the first episode, so I'm going to not rush it too much and be clear and as concise as possible, but also give a good explanation as I happen. The facets of the value styles based on thinking and feeling. Subjective versus objective. I'm 60% subjective versus 40% objective. As a subjective person, you naturally take into account the needs of others. When making important decisions, you make sure that your chosen course of action is consistent with your values and your knowledge about what's best for everyone involved. And that trait is usually associated with feeling. While objective people evaluate information impersonally, they tend not to be swayed by personal pleas and believe that the best decisions treat everyone equally. Very ironic. And 60-40, very close numbers as well. In line with the 58-42. I feel like this right here is exactly what makes INFJ really good counselors and friends and very good judges in unbiased situations particularly. But even when they're biased, as long as they're not too overly emotionally engaged in the situation, they have very rational, sound feedback. And that makes them seem very mature, intelligent, and just like grounded. And the reason that a lot of people seek out INFJ types as friends and confidants and that kind of thing. The next facet is rational versus compassionate. 64% compassionate versus 36% rational. You're very close to borderline in this facet. Rather than preferring one style strongly, you most likely blend both styles and may take a different approach depending on your mood or circumstances. This is, I don't know why they don't have this statement on many of the other facets, but it's true for objectivity and subjectivity too. That's very true. It's very dependent on mood and circumstances entirely. When you're being more rational, you keep your emotions in check and prefer to be around people who do the same. Very true. Vulnerability makes you uncomfortable, and you may avoid people who you perceive to be weak or overly sensitive. Yeah, and I remember there was a time not that long ago, a couple years ago, where I was really in trying to control my environment. I was really emotionally burdensome people, and it's really cold for me to put people in that kind of perspective, but I was in a very rational frame of mind. And, it is also kind of hypocritical because I can similarly be very emotional. But because of what I was going through, circumstantial, and the moods that I was in, I was struggling a lot with depression, Basically, I had gone for almost over 5 years with no surgeries after having surgery once or twice a year from the age of 4. And so my condition just progressed so severely that it was taking a toll not only on me physically, in physical pain, but, you know, a lot of mental and emotional pain. And I was overwhelmed. And and I just couldn't bear having any more emotional baggage. I couldn't take anyone else's. Normally I can and I want to, but at that time I couldn't. And I was being very, very rational. Since then, and when I took this test, I've made steps in, over the last couple of years. I had, with this last one, I've had 14, like maybe 12 or 13 operations within the past couple of years to catch up and to better my physical self in an effort to also better my mental self, and that was just the first step. And now, I started seeing a psychiatrist and working on my mental health, as well as trying to better outside things, like getting more, I found a stable living environment and arrangements when that was really hard. I was renting rooms for years, bouncing around, with crappy freaking landlords and crappy tenants and, just far from ideal situations, but doing what I had to survive. And, now I'm much better off and able to kind of share in that experience and hopefully give other people hope, as well as still, I'm still on that journey, and there's still some help that I need, and there's still some things I need to correct, and there's places I want to go and people I want to meet. So I'm working on that. But anyways, and now, of course you can tell that now my compassion has gone back up and my rationality has gone back down. When you're in compassionate mode, you identify with others' feelings and are sympathetic to others' suffering. You do not mind being around people experiencing difficult emotions, and in fact, feel called to help and support. One second. My laptop went to sleep on me. Feel called to help and support people who are in trouble. And that's another thing too, that it also kind of led to where I was a couple of years ago. Not entirely, but in my financial and stability, my financial and physical stability, as far as like housing and a place to be, I realized that my that calling that I feel to support people when they're troubled, can often get me in trouble, because I do have these times where I just want to help. Like, things are going decently for me, and I want to help. Like, if I have the ability, I want to. Like, I've had people help me in the past, and I continue to have people help me. So I don't know. It feels so cliche. It feels so like commonplace to say. Like, one of those things that people say and they mean, but they don't really mean, But I genuinely, with every fiber of my soul, but I really do. I genuinely mean it. Like, my heart feels like it's catching fire when I say it with, the intensity that I hold. That I really want to make the world better and leave a positive impact. My old bio used to be to die a legend, but I still want to be, like, I want to be a legend, like, I want to leave I have ambitions that are too heavy to lift up. And to be honest, the responses I've been getting from this podcast thus far have really just inflamed those ambitions and given me hope that I didn't lose, but it's increased the amount that I have once again. But yeah, and that's, again, a sign, obvious showing of my compassion coming out. But one step at a time, and we'll finish this podcast and move on to the next one before I get too far ahead of myself. The next section, challenging versus agreeable. 59% challenging, 41% agreeable. You're close to the borderline, also on this facet. Rather than preferring one style strongly, you basically bounce back and forth. So when you're challenging mode, you enjoy a good debate. And man, do I hear shit whenever I'm in that mode. People always fucking, oh, why you want to argue? I don't want to argue. I want to debate. There's a big difference between an intellectual argument or a debate and these childish arguments that people get into where there's no substance to it. What I'm doing is trying to bring substance. I tend to play devil's advocate. That's the biggest thing. In order to strike up, thought and reflection but man, 80% of the time it backfires and people just take it to heart. And then I look like a bad guy for quote unquote starting it. But that's the thing about INFJ, the misunderstood. The type that is fears and feels most misunderstood is because we can't share intention, that would probably be the best power in the whole world, is the ability to share intention. If you could legitimately share the intention, if we could find a way to communicate, to accurately and indiscriminately share or read intention, even though there's potential danger in intention, of course, but I feel it would alleviate a lot of problem. It would clear up a lot of the shadiness of society as it is now, for sure, and better a lot of relationships, and clear up a lot of communication errors. But 'tis the challenge of being human. But yeah, I wish I could show my intention, but I can't, and therefore I'm often misunderstood when I try to do that. And then you try to explain it beforehand, and you just sound freaking awkward and weird, and like, why are you overthinking so much? But anyways, enough of that rant. So much so, yeah. So you enjoy a good debate, so much so that even when you agree with someone, you might play devil's advocate. Ironic. You might play devil's advocate just to stimulate the discussion. You don't shy away from conflict, and you even find it exciting. Very true. And sometimes I feel a little sadistic or masochistic or like a little bit of an antagonist in life when that happens. But I kind of like the feeling. When you're feeling more agreeable, you do your best to make others' lives easy and to adapt their needs when you can. You tend to argue. You don't tend to argue, as you have a talent for seeing things from another person's point of view. Even when you don't agree, you support other people in their opinions. And yeah, I can definitely be this way. But I'm definitely much more challenging now than I used to be. I was probably much more agreeable than I used to. I'm probably much less agreeable than I used to be. But I think that's typical for age, especially in men. Not to be too gendering, but with people in general, I know, it's a tendency to get, as you get older, you get your walls increase. You get a little colder and you become a little less agreeable. You realize you have to stand up for yourself sometimes, and then you find people you care about and you want to stand up for them. So that also takes you being less agreeable. So it's fitting for me, for sure. The next one, individualist. I don't know why I said it like that. Versus helpful. You're very close to the borderline on this one as well. When you're an individualist, you're not particularly nurturing, and appreciate being surrounded by people who can take care of themselves. You tend to have an every man for himself philosophy, and you dislike having helpless people depend on you. This happens most when I have to work on a team, and primarily in work. And it's really difficult because as an INFJ, you crave connection with other people, and you need it to be your best self. So how can I work but then at the same time, you work on a team, and more often than not, it's not going to be the dream team. There's going to be some people that you're having to carry, and I just get tired of having to carry people. And I get tired of having to carry people and getting nothing of it, from the people I should. And so, my consistency in my work reflects this a lot of times. But yeah, I can definitely see this in myself. I'm typically not like this, but yeah, in more professional or structured environments, I tend to be this way. Versus helpful. When you're feeling helpful, you are called to care for others with their less fortunate, less capable. Oh, sorry, that are less fortunate or less capable than yourselves. You enjoy providing for others, and are often drawn to children, the elderly, and others who can benefit from your help. This trait is usually associated with feeling. And yeah, I very much feel that way, and that's a big influence in me starting this podcast, and in a lot of my future ambitions. Definitely is that helpful side of me. It's 57 versus 43, if I didn't say so before, but individualist 43, helpful 53, 57. Um, I realized too, though, sometimes it said you feel called to care for people that are less fortunate or less capable than you are. And I have this really like phobia of pity. I don't want to pity people. And at the same time, I don't want to be pitied. More so, I don't want to be pitied. I know that's kind of, I don't know, it's a weird thing, but to to just uh, to just divulge a little, I was speaking with someone today and realized how sometimes I see like I have a talent for writing and I guess for speaking too. And I was just telling him like how it happens, how it just comes to me. And as that happened, I realized, I kind of had an epiphany moment, small epiphany moment, where I realized that because it comes so naturally to me, I don't really see it as a one up on other people. Like I guess I devalue it as an I didn't see it, not devalue it, but I didn't see it as a gift. I guess in a way I do devalue it too. I didn't see it as much of a gift as it probably is. Um, and for that reason, like similarly, most of the time I don't really see people as less fortunate or less capable than me because I have so many struggles. I'm like, man, the majority of people are much more capable and much more fortunate than I am. And I try not to, I don't want to be stuck in that on that perspective. Even though I feel it's true, it doesn't disqualify me from anything. I also feel that's very true. And even if and similarly, I feel like there are people that have a lot of, like, that are more, maybe less fortunate or capable, but only by choice, only because they continue to make stupid decisions or continue to put themselves in bad environments or continue to, not hold themselves accountable. And so, yeah, it just drew to consideration that idea that maybe sometimes I have it a little better than I think I do. And one, I should be more willing to, well, yeah, one, I should be more accepting of others, but I always, ponder that in my mind. And it's always something that, for the most part, I'm very accepting of other people anyways. I have my times where, like I said, I just don't want to be around anyone. I become more individualistic. But generally, I, want to be beneficial to others and lift people up. But second, the other thing was that I need to value my own personal skills and abilities more. And this podcast has really helped me see that as well, and the starting results from it, and feedback and reactions really helped me to see things that things that others have seen along the way. I've been told a lot of these things a lot of times. It's just, I guess, putting myself out there and making myself vulnerable and seeing it come back well is in an almost ideal manner is really, it's crazy and kind of awakening. It's just the circumstances of it that really changed the reception of similar words and reactions to those I've had before in the past, and then to, I guess, where I am now and what I'm looking to accomplish and, what I'm trying to do. But if I may, the next section, self-reliant versus cooperative. This is very circumstantial also. But I'm 66% cooperative versus 34% self-reliant. As a cooperative person, you like to work in concert with others, participating to achieve a common goal, be in sync with other people. And a lot of this has to do, too, with the responses I've been getting from my podcast, I know. Well, I take that back because I took this a while back. But a lot of this has to do, these ratings have to do with the betterment of my environment. But I'm sure that these ratings are even more so closer to the truth because of the responses I've been getting. And I thank you guys. Self-reliant people prefer not to depend on other people, don't mind striking out on their own, and they don't need the approval of others to decide on their course of action. Yeah, it really depends. Very depends. I think INFJ tend to, in tougher scenarios, they tend to kind of want the reassurance of someone they really care about or look up to. But then for me, there's been moments in life where I just felt alone. Like, no one really showed genuine, intentional care towards me in a manner, at least, that I was willing to receive on terms, on a, not terms, but like a time scale that I felt was real. It's kind of hard to explain, but yeah, and in those times, I was very self-reliant. I was very self-reliant. Striking out on their own. Freaking 2017, I got kicked out of my parents'. Well, yeah, I got kicked out. We had an argument. My mom said, "You have 24 hours to leave." I'm pretty sure it was just a thumb. One of those, under my thumb moments. But, I mean, fuck, Sky. Excuse me. I don't know. I'm apologizing. Anyways, but me being extremely stubborn myself, said, okay. So I, grabbed my stuff, called a friend, loosely friend, and moved out that day. And that day I decided that I was moving to California. And it was like a month and a half later, I threw everything in storage within that month and a half and flew out to California, turned in my notice at work, and I've been here since. So very much willing to strike out on my own. And of course, I had a place to land here that got shook up, but and was temporary, but it was a start, and it definitely enabled me to at least start. So I am happy for that. The final is tough versus tolerant. I know this is also very circumstantial. 34% tough, 66% tolerant. As a tolerant person, you believe that everybody makes mistakes. Everybody deserves forgiveness, and most often, you give people the benefit of the doubt. Even when they do something to hurt you, it's important to preserve your relationship, even if it requires you to let some things slide. That trait is usually associated with feelings. The motto for tough people: fool me once, shame on you; fool me twice, shame on me. When people disappoint them, they don't hesitate to cut them off. They might forgive, but they'll never forget. And this is very true for INFJ with the door slam. But you really have to hurt them, and most often repetitively hurt them in a severe manner, or betray them, for that to happen. It's very hard for me to do. I think some INFJs are much quicker to pull the trigger on that. For me, it's very difficult. I think a lot of times too, I'll like halfway pull the trigger, not fully, and then kind of go back. Kind of like I close the door and lock it, but I keep the key. I don't throw the key away. Just in case. But yeah. So the last section, judging versus perceiving. This dimension of personality describes how you manage your life. Your preference for perceiving versus judging has to do with your orientation towards structure, schedules, deadlines, and organization. It also has to do with how you tend to manage your time and approach how you tend to manage your time and approach the work that you have to do. Perceivers like freedom, spontaneity, and they have a carefree attitude towards life and would rather be flexible than structured. While judgers like structure and order, they keep organized and plan ahead, resist distractions, and stay focused on their goals. Perceivers prefer to follow the whims of the moment, make the rules up as they go, have the freedom to be flexible, brainstorm options, do things with inspiration strikes, go with the flow, and enjoy surprises. Sorry, do things with inspiration strikes. I'm I'm a bad dictator. I'm a bad reader sometimes. Create a plan and stick to. Judges like to create a plan and stick to it. See a task through to completion. Adhere to schedules. Set goals. Maintain focus. Follow rules and regulations, and set clear expectations. My percentiles for these two are 70% judging versus 30% perceiving. I'm definitely by this very much a judger or a judge. Yeah. And in my relationships with a lot of perceivers, sometimes they're tough. The craziness, the spontaneity of them is difficult. It's good from a distance, but when I'm close to them and we're good friends and I dated one, and for me, I think for a lot of INFJ it works out really well. It's like ENFP are like a match made in heaven for a lot of INFJ, or at least one of the types that tend to be a match made in heaven. They're like the opposites attract type for INFJ. But for me, man, for dating and extreme closeness, for dating, I don't know if it would work. It would work for me. Maybe as a different person. I don't know. I'm still friends with this person, and I care about them very much, But just thinking, yeah, it's tough. Getting it. There's something about perceivers that's just hard for me, and I think it is a lot of the spontaneity, and it's my need, and my desire for structure, and stability, and set goals, and a focus, shared focus. At least basic. That kind of causes a little conflict from time to time, interrupts the harmony of that relationship. But I can see it also, working as like iron sharpening iron, and it could be beneficial for both parties. It's all very dependent on the person, the people themselves. The facets of this, there's only 5. So the facets of judging and perceiving are relaxed versus orderly. As an orderly, 70% orderly versus 30% relaxed. As an orderly person, you have an appreciation for the structure and order of your life, in your life. And you like to stay organized. You believe in a place for everything and everything in its place. This trait is usually associated by judging. The other half, relaxed people, appreciate the chaos in life. They dislike very orderly, structured environments, feeling that life is more interesting when things are a little messy. And yeah, that kind of it in small doses, yes, but the idea on paper gives me apprehension. I don't like it in general. I would much prefer something be orderly as opposed to chaotic. And the best I can do is controlled chaos, but it has to be a chaos that I have to be able to acclimate to that chaos. If I don't have time, then man, it really stresses me out. The next facet is scheduled versus spontaneity, or spontaneous. Basic, same thing. As a scheduled person, you keep a daily schedule and like to organize your time well in advance, as you know, so you know what you'll be doing and when. You dislike last moment changes to your plans, and especially abhor lateness. This is really pretty true. I'm 64 and 36, or 64% schedule. Um, yeah, that's accurate. I mean, I can accept some, but for the most part, yes, very much. On the other half, spontaneous people dislike having time schedules, prefer instead to go with the flow and do what they feel they like doing at any given time on impulse. And the last facet here is casual versus conscientious. 73% conscientious, 27% casual. As a conscientious person, you are hardworking and like to take care of your responsibilities before you let yourself have fun. You believe strongly in the importance of fulfilling your duties, and you never try to weasel out of a task that is your responsibility. Whereas, on the other half, casual people are fun-loving and feel that life is to be enjoyed. They try to avoid taking on too many responsibilities that may get in the way of their enjoyment in life. And I can see, like, for me, yes, very conscientious. But there is a level to it, and I need some casualness in my day to day. Yeah, I need some casualness even in my day to day. And this area too makes me think about how a lot of, I don't know if it's true, but noticed that, and I feel like a lot of INFJ types can also be typed as an Enneagram Type 1 if they are extremely conscious, like if they fall very extremely on this judging portion, extremely conscientious and scheduled, like even more so than me apparently, because, and I feel a lot of times I can relate and have a kind of an interest in Type 1s, because they, from what I know, they tend to be very organized and like one to fulfill obligations and their duties, and duty focused, and like they're the consistent type, the reliable type, and they're like strong focus on getting things done. I envy sometimes, and I feel like having someone like that. And I've had similar people in my life before, and I often am in awe of them and kind of have gawked over them in the past, because I need that in my life. I want that in my life, like not overly severe, but it definitely helps balance out the messier side of me that I wish was a little more organized and a little more together. This poem is called Emotion. Emotion, emotion, a violent ocean, both beautiful and repulsive you are. Feeling, oh feeling, you send my mind reeling, and deceptive in nature by far. Hope, oh hope, you stand like the Pope, and we hold faith that you are true. Dreams, oh dreams, shine bright like sunbeams. As I pray, you will shine through.